So, Yankee, welcome to the Untold Story of Raregroove. And your story interweaves with mine quite considerably. I think we met probably 1984, 1985. We might have rubbed shoulders even before that.
Yes.
And, I know that you can piece together a lot of the scene from way back when because you were immersed in what I think I probably met you in Leicester Square. And there were a lot of b-boys hanging around, the dancers, yourself. I think the first time I met you was in Leicester Square, and you just broke into human beatbox, which we'd only really heard on the Dougie Fresh, the show. And it was like, I was really, really wowed that you'd also like mastered the technique. And I think we could say that you were the first UK human beatbox. Is that not true?
Amongst I was the first premier beatbox who went on to do quite a lot of shows and support a lot of international artists during those times, which there isn't much footage to get a hold of, which is a bit sad.
Yeah, and of course the hip hop scene at that time, it was the golden era, and it was a real. I always refer to it as a kind of melting pot. So like you'd go to clubs and the hip hop was being played alongside what we now call rare groove.
Yes.
I mean, it was a real mixture of like funk, soul, hip hop, underground music.
Yeah.
In fact, we hadn't even termed it, or we haven't even coined the phrase rare groove. That came much later with Norman Jay doing his Rare Groove show on Pirate Kiss FM. In those days, I just called it underground music. So, introduce yourself, and because, a lot of people might not be aware of your history, and just give us, a viewpoint from those early days when me and you would have just, been hanging around on street corners. I would have been promoting my clubs, meeting people on
Taking
photographs. Yeah, I documented the early club scene, but I mean that's going back to like 82, 83. But this was just a little bit later when the scene had developed, and let's hear some of your history.
Well, my name is Anthony Washington, and my stage name is known by Yanki B. I'm the first premier beatbox of London, and I specify premier because at that time there wasn't much beatboxers coming forward, and everybody was doing a style that was very reminiscent to the show Dougie Fresh, where I actually kind of mastered a different sound, which was more closer to the 808 drum machine, which is in most electro music of the time. Kraftwerk, Rishi Sakamoto, these guys who were making electronic music for an audience but not for a scene. And pretty much, most of the dancers, most of the hip hop dancers used to always listen, not used to, but there wasn't any form of hip hop music at that time. It was rap music, but it was no hip hop music. So what dancers used to dance to was either soul, break beats that were little break sections that DJs would cut in order to actually get the funky beat, and then have to roll the funky beat in continuously. Hence that you've got the DJ with 2 turntables, sometimes 3 and sometimes 4. The breakbeats were very much, old rare grooves that were just spun over and over. And then after you had electronic music, which was another form of dance, which we used to use as a index for our art form. But there wasn't really a hip hop genre of music that came a little bit later on. And during the time when I used to be in Covent Gardens, I met you, and I think you recorded me doing the beatbox, and then from then on we became great friends, and then continue to be great friends to this day.
Yeah, I mean, even when I haven't seen you for, long periods, it's great to catch up with you. And,
Thank you.
Documenting the Untold Story of Rare Groove, this is a real chance to actually find out and dig a little bit deeper, people's histories. And, at the time that we met, we were just into the music. There was
Yeah.
there was nothing else apart from the music and just getting together and getting dancers together.
Yeah.
That was what it was all about.
Yeah.
And
Indeed.
it's only years later that, we can actually say, wow, we were there. Not only were we there, we were part of an evolving history
Yeah.
that really forms the backbone of hip hop. It forms the backbone of, club culture in the UK.
Yeah. Indeed.
And, piecing together these stories from people who have never told their story, brings the story to light for the first time in my eyes. Because I just feel that, that story has been kind of controlled. The narrative has been controlled over these years
Sure.
by people who are in the limelight.
Yeah.
And it didn't tell the real story. It didn't tell the true story. It didn't get to the bottom of how this scene evolved and who was there and who the characters were there and, the energy on the street. So one of the things I always ask when I'm doing these interviews is, can you describe, transport yourself back?
Okay.
I want you to, walk us through several experiences. I mean, you had your foot, in the Covent Garden hip hop scene.
I was one of the first people in Covent Gardens dancing, and as it is documented by DJ Business. In Covent Gardens was the hub. It was an art hub, and a lot of people who had an art form, which was dancing, breaking, and body popping, used to go to Covent Gardens to actually try and raise some money. So you raise money to actually, hang out and enjoy the rest of the day, or to buy an item, a new pair of trainers or something. But people used to go down to Covent Gardens to actually perform. So I was one of the first people who actually used to be in Covent Gardens, and this was during the period of late 82, 83. I may be wrong. It may be 83 going on. However, it was early days then, and there were not a lot of people performing. Actually, the one guy that actually used to perform then, there was which is quite a lot, was Dr. Stewart, who used to do his act, and a lot of mainstream artists have come out of Covent Gardens or have been influenced by the scene of Covent Gardens. Back then, there was only a few types of music. There was reggae, lovers rock, soul, disco, and classical music, and then after you have pop music, which we call poop music. Now, in some pop music, we used to dance to because it used to have the right rhythm. Talking Heads, for instance. This is one track that most of the dancers used to dance to. Talking Heads band. One of the artists went on to create the Tom Tom Club, which created Genius of Love, which is again has been regurgitated throughout the hip hop scene. British music didn't have any music because we were listening very much to American artists. So eventually we actually created our own sort of style, like drum and bass, grime, and broken beats. So very much the British music scene has to pay a lot of homage to the people who actually were the influencers and the trailblazers of the early days in Covent Gardens, because that was an academy. It was like an academy of artists who, with many skills. There are lots of people with many artistic skills, which they didn't have a vehicle or a stage where they can actually do their art form. So they used to go to Covent Gardens just to earn money, and then have fun, maybe smoke a bit, check out some girls, get some European talent,
So yeah, so this idea of like painting the picture, let's transport you right back to one of your earliest memories, hanging around in Covent Garden.
Okay.
Can you paint that picture, the people who'd come and go, the characters,
Yeah.
what the atmosphere was like?
It was a community. It was very much a loved community with people who were on the cusp of rap music and on deep into soul, because you have to remember there was a scene where there were jazz dancers, and before hip hop there was a lot of jazz dancers who used to do a lot of skits, a lot of dancing. So you had a mixture of crowd, but they all loved the new type of music that was coming out, which was rap music, which included tracks from yesteryear. And the people were a mixture of people. I mean, you have Italians, you have French, you have Polish, you have a wide range of different types of people, and they were all they had no racial preferences, but what was mostly important was the music and the philosophy behind the whole hip hop persona. Yeah.
So what I wanted you to do is literally take yourself back to a day in Covent Garden, as though you're reliving it, and just the characters who were passing by, the key characters on the scene.
Oh my God!
Who was dancing to the beatboxes?
Yeah, the names. I will fail to actually list lots of names. I've listed one already, which was Dr. Stewart, who went on to do Fifth Element. He was in the film. Then you have Gary Beagle, who was in a band called City Limits, which I do believe that you used to write for. You used to write for a magazine called City Limits back in the time.
So actually, no, my friend Rose, a mutual friend of ours, Rose Christie, she did like the nightlife column of City Limits. I would contribute because I was a photographer, just fresh out of college at that time, and Rose used to ask me to, take photographs of people that she was interviewing. In fact, I've got a really amazing. Well, no, I've got an amazing story that she phoned me up once and said, "Look, I've got two rappers. I'm just got to do this interview up at it was at Swiss Cottage at the Holiday Inn."
Right.
So I went up with my camera. I took some photographs. Now, fast forward 35 years, and I'd forgotten that I'd taken the photographs. Completely forgotten that I'd taken the photographs. They were on a reel of film that I also took at an underground party called the Circle Line that Tosh organised.
Yeah,
And
CJ McIntosh.
well, you see, at that party, what would happen is that he would put word out that he was going down the underground with a beatbox, and a lot of the graph artists would come down.
Yeah.
And during that party, word must have got out, because there were probably about 10 or 15 graph artists, and what would happen is that we'd go down into the circle line, just get on a train and go round and round on the circle line. And every time we stopped at a station, these graph artists would get out and literally graph up the station. They'd run across the tracks, they'd come back into the carriage, and then the train would leave and we'd go on to the next station. Well, of course, in those days, no one had heard anything about, that sort of culture.
Yeah.
But there I was as a young photographer. I took some amazing, amazing photographs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So rewind this 30 years.
Yeah.
And one of the graph artists approached me and said, "Steve, I remember you took some photographs on that day." And it took me about a year for these photographs to come to light. And they're amazing. There's Constantine, and I think Feathers were there. Beautiful photographs, which at some point I'll publish, that document this circle line party. But anyway, on the same reel of film, when I found these images, it was like, oh my God, there's Will Smith.
Yeah.
And I was trying to piece together in my head, did he come down to this party? But when I talked to Rose a few weeks later, she said, no, you took photographs of, Fresh Prince at the Holiday Inn. And I had these beautiful, beautiful photographs again, which have never been released, of like Will Smith as a young rapper the first time he came to London.
Yeah.
Actually in his hotel room at the Holiday Inn. I didn't even realise that I'd ever met him until it came to light 30 years later.
Yeah.
So it all fits, everything kind of links in. And what we realise is that our paths crossed with all, I call them like the future superstars.
Yeah.
And we didn't realise that we were like rubbing shoulders with all these amazing characters that would be part of not only club culture, but the
music history.
Music history.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, this is an amazing thing. I mean, Will Smith at that time, he was just an artist who was working with, oh God, what's his DJ name? But I can't remember his DJ name because it's not on my tip of my tongue at the moment. But you had a lot of artists needed to come to London to actually to make because London was the next point of where hip hop went. So from the States, it didn't go to Canada, it didn't go to any LA. It hit kind of, when it hit LA, it was like it hit London at the same time, because a lot of the reggae artists who used to do the sound systems used to supply equipment to these events. So I mean, you used to run a club. You used to run a club called Wicked Pulse in the African Centre, which later on turned into the Soul to Soul nights. Yeah.
Well, what happened there was, so I've told this story before, but in a nutshell, I teamed up with Jazzy. He'd found the venue, and it was Sunday nights in Covent Garden. He was just about to launch this club, and I said to him, "Look, tell you what, I can come in as your co-promoter and bring our following." And it was guys like you and the dancers. I think I've interviewed Sam. We introduced Sam to Africa Centre. And a lot of our sort of what I call, the WAG club, Mud Club crowd who started following Wicked Pulse at some of our other events through Jerry, IDJ dancer who used to help promote our events. We had like a real hardcore following of people who just loved that sort of WAG style of, funky, underground music, which has now become known as Rare Groove. But, we brought that as a package to Jazzy. And we brought in, the sort of trendy London wag club, mud club set, who we were all connected with. And, Jazzy brought his sort of North London sophisticated soul reggae, revival crowd. And because we were playing music on like a reggae sound system in the middle of London on a Sunday night, word got out within 3 weeks. We were absolutely packing that venue because for the first time ever, you were hearing that music on a reggae sound system. Because when you heard it at places like the Wag or Cat in the Hat, these were trailblazers, but no one was playing this back to back on a reggae sound system,
which gave you the volume and the depth.
Well, you see, the thing is, a reggae sound system, when you hear the sub bass, it moves the air. Right. The smaller clubs in London, or even the bigger clubs, they weren't set up to push the air. So it then became a physical vibration. So when you heard bass lines on things like Express Yourself, when you heard the bass lines on the Headhunters, suddenly you were feeling the music as well as hearing it.
It was a physical form.
So that's why I feel that, doing the Africa Centre, with Jazzy was a pivotal moment in the Rare Groove scene, because it was that first time that you were actually physically, you got all the dancers together, because you had the hip hop dancers from your crew, you had the jazz dancers through Jerry's crew, you had the sophisticated soul crowds that Jazzy brought, and then you had the London clubbers who sort of came in, and they were just all different styles. So again, that sort of melting pot of different crowds, and the fact that we were there on a Sunday night, you had to come out for the music, because you weren't going out to pose on a Sunday night.
Yeah, because there wasn't much places open on a Sunday night. I mean, London was pretty much, only Chinatown was only Chinatown.
Well, it was a ghost town. I mean, Sunday was a ghost town.
It was a ghost town.
We didn't even know early on that we were going to pull this off. It was only because of that unique relationship of, bringing in that funky crowd, the dancers, hearing the music on that reggae sound system, on the soul to soul sound system, that really gave people the first time, or an experience for the first time. I mean, of course, you've got to give credit to Norman J, and you've got to give credit because he was obviously working with his brother, Joey J. And this was like the same era. But the thing about the Africa Centre is it was the first time there was a regular night in the West End. Every single Sunday you could come to the Africa Centre. And of course the door policy, we didn't have a door policy. It was like, if you love the music, it doesn't matter what you look like, what race you are, what colour you are, what tribe you're from, you could get in just by turning up on a Sunday, because there was a feeling of kind of unity that people had now discovered this alternative underground culture and vibe.
A community.
And so, while we're on the subject, because I want to return to your story in a minute, could you describe you mentioned the Africa Centre, can you describe your experience, how you might have heard about it, what drew you to that club on a Sunday night?
You drew their attention to me, and then other people were mentioning to me that this event was going to be happening. However, I was one of the guys in London who always knew where things were happening, because we didn't have mobile telephones. Most of us didn't even have telephones in our house. Some people had to use the telephone boxes outside their house to actually as their office. So any information about any clubs or any warehouse parties that were going on at that time, which were quite dubious back then, because any events like that were going on, the police was always quick to shut it down, because they have a view of you know, a certain crowd of people. If there's more than two, then it's a riot. So therefore, people had to walk in different ways. They had to walk in big communities so that, you know, they don't get in trouble. They don't get in trouble. Yeah. So I was always in the know of all the clubs, or everything that was happening. And African Center for sure was the, you know, was chicken soup for the soul, pretty much, because you have a varied amount of different artists who, you know, if you really indexed the people who walked through your door, you would realize that a lot of these people are in LA actually doing similar stuff, but of moved on in a different way, starting from the London scene. You've got Tricky, you've got Rodney P, you've got, you know, the list goes on. It's very hard for me to list them off the top of my head. And
Are you talking about them doing contemporary things right now at 2000 and
yeah. I mean, they are the godfathers. They are the god. All the people that came to your club are the godfathers of British music history scene. Because remember, in Britain we didn't have much music varieties, so, you know, very much this soul come hip hop come reggae was a mixture of cultures that was a community that was there existing already. However, they were pretty much the olden crowd. They were the one step crowd, that we call them, the one step. They only do one step and then step back. But when you you have the dancers who are, you know what I'm saying, who are, you know, kind of, you know, ballerinas, and, you know what I'm saying, very expressive, you know, they do more than one step, you know. So so from that you've got drum and bass, you've got grime, now you've got trap, and a lot of people come, you know, saying that, you know, Wayne is actually, what's his name, the artist Wayne, he's the godfather of that. But however, pretty much of a lot of soul bands from Britain who used to play in the States, and I'm talking about soul African bands, because London they had a great influence from Africa, because be it that they were close to the continent, there was a lot of artists that were coming to London and playing their music. King Sunny Ade, Fela Kuti, these people who were originally doing two-steps, were doing two-step from back then, but it was called world music. So you had a variety of different types of music that created drum and bass. Drum and bass and jungle is a mixture of Indian music, reggae music, also soul, so and then broken beats. So that's hip hop. So, you know, you have different genres that actually created drum and bass and jungle, but a lot of people don't talk about it because they don't know the roots and the etymology of how it was created. So I mean, this is, you know, you have to take your hat off, Steve, you know what I'm saying, and bow to the crowd, because, you know, you were in the midst, and also the influencer that actually helped people to move on and find their art form, you know, and then be focused on their art form. So, you know, I tip my hat to you, you know.
Well, thank you very much. But, you know, as I said, we didn't even realize that we were part of this history. All we were doing was bringing people together for good energy on the dance floor. That was always our mission, and it still is our mission. I mean, you know, we've got an event coming up. It's 29th of Jan.
I'm looking forward to that.
It's called the Expansions Rare Groove Party.
Great name.
And we're bringing, you know, that original energy, you know, back to London for anyone who missed it the first time round. And what I want to do is just, you know, also mention, you know, from those early days of Wicked Pulse, Soul to Soul at the Africa Centre. Of course, you had people coming through the door like, you know, Nelly Hooper, who then teamed up with Jazzy.
Yeah.
And you know, the rest is history. So you know, Nelly kind of brought that sort of trip hop, the trip hop hip hop sound from Bristol, you know, and introduced that in the Soul to Soul productions. And you know, that huge big like bass line and hip hop beat that you hear in those early Soul to Soul ones, the ones where, you know, Nelly is co-producing with Jazzy. You know, that was a direct influence. In a way, you know, you've got the soul, but at the same time, it just showed how hip hop fed back into soul music at that time.
Yeah, it did indeed. I mean, again, like I say, we have drum and bass and jungle, and pretty much the early jungle sourced most of its vocals from the old reggae artists. But however, the combination of the beats, you know, the broken beats that they were using, was very much reminiscence to tabla music, music that was played by India. The multiple snare patterns, which is very similar to, you know, to Sikh music, and northern Indian styles. So these people don't get no credit, because everything is actually focused on black and white. But in terms of the hip hop throughout the world, you know, you have bands like the Can, you know, who were making like funk, soul, pop, rock, that were making beats, Losing Your Vitamins, for instance. A lot of DJs used to mix that track and just use the drum beat just for the dancers. Nothing else was heard. You know, you don't hear you're losing your vitamins, but you just heard the drum beats. So you got that is included. You have grime, which is, again, that is a respite to the American scene of hip hop, and Britain wanted to actually create their own sound, which was much more element of reggae and Afro world music, and kind of which is turned into a different type of grime music, which is all thanks to the music scene that started in Covent Garden. Not only just Covent Garden, you've got places like Leicester and Birmingham that had their influence as well. Of course, they had their influence, and they had some ambassadors in their cities who were, you know, the alpha males, or the alpha artists. However, Can you name? I couldn't name any at this present stage. I mean, the Something Crew. They used to come down to Covent Gardens quite a lot, and they used to come from Leicester. The Wild Bunch. They used to come down quite regularly.
Of course, Nelly. That's what I'm saying. You see, you know, Nelly, who is you know, part of the Wild Bunch, and of course, you know, they were working down in Bristol doing parties with Massive Attack. So there was this amazing sort of energy that was drawing upon the music of the past, but, you know, fusing it with hip hop as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things I always say is that, you know, Rare Groove and the music that we were looking for at that time to play to the dancers, it always had to be syncopated, it always had to be organic.
Yeah.
And the only way to find what I call that real, you know, organic sound is you had to dial back, you had to dig in the crates. And it wasn't trendy because it was retro. It wasn't trendy because, you know, we were digging for something in the past.
Yeah.
It was, we were tuning into something that had this kind of organic feel, an injection of funk, had the syncopation for the dancers, so it wasn't on the 4/4 like disco.
Yeah. And presented in a particular way.
And then we would tell a story. You know, we would put these records back to back, and every single Rare Groove track that has now become, you know, well known as a Rare Groove track.
Yes.
These were individual records that artists produced that were kind of one-off, quirky masterpieces.
Yeah.
So, you know, in taking all that music from the past and putting it together back to back, you could create this wonderful kind of tapestry of sounds. And again, that's why I refer to, you know, playing it, say, at the Africa Centre as opposed to, you know, the smaller little London clubs.
Yeah. Limelight, Wet Club, you know.
Because it brought the sub bass alive, and you could get away with playing tracks like Turn Off the Lights, Jungle Fever by the Chukachas, because it, you know, the reggae sound system gave it a new dimension that literally had probably never even been heard by the producers in the studio. So, you know, when we were dropping tracks, you know, when I played Fred Wesley's Foreplay, imagine, right? That was probably played in a very good, you know, mastering suite in a studio, but they probably never tested it on a reggae sound system. So it was like we had 600 people rammed into this small room on a Sunday night at the Africa Centre. And, you know, my feeling was we brought that music alive for the first time with the subs being played. And that's why those nights, you know, have become legendary and magical, because not only were we hearing the music almost fresh for the first time, like it had never been heard before, but the dancers had never heard it. If they had heard it, they'd never felt it in that way.
In that way, exactly.
So, you know, I would love to document, you know, your experience. You know, you obviously came to the Africa Centre many times.
Yeah, I was one of the chosen ambassadors that you guys. You used to let me in free, and whoever the entourage that I brought with me, obviously they were good people. So therefore, you always used to, you know, look after me in that terms. Never paid, in my years of going out in the club back in the day, I never paid to go into any clubs, especially if you had anything to do with it, Steve. But yeah, it was, you know, it's kind of. What is really needs to be said is that actually we are the people who changed the music scene in Britain. We are, and as little as it may be just that one strand in a brush that's painting a picture. We are still part of that brush. We are part of the strands that actually created the arts, the arts for everybody else to actually, to, you know, create their own masterpieces, you know what I'm saying? So we have seen the scene change. We've seen a lot of artists come and take from us and don't give any credit. Well, not take from us, actually, that was a wrong phrase. Embrace and, you know, utilize for their own monetary reasons without actually giving any respects from the people who actually influenced them. So yeah, very much. I mean, you had the limelight. I mean, I did a show with at that time I used to do beatbox with several rappers, and I was always specific on the rappers who I used to do beatbox with, and Junior G was one of them. JC 00001, who later became the fastest rapper in Britain, and I worked with him quite a lot. We actually did a show at Limelight at that time. The Limelight, was a club that actually is similar to a club in New York Hall of Limelight, and they had a Limelight over here. And I was supporting the Beastie Boys, because the Beastie Boys was doing a little show in the Limelight. And I was supporting them. Me and JC went on stage. We killed the crowd, and very much. And you know, the guys from the Beastie Boys said, "Oh, guys, you guys are hot, man. You guys are, you know, you guys, you know, I couldn't believe that, you know, you guys are so advanced down here, you know, so and stuff like that." So we took that on board. And then after we go on the dance floor, after, you know, supporting Beastie Boys, we go on the dance floor and we see, you know, who we're dancing next to is Will Smith. Will Smith was busting a boogie.
Well, he was probably there that same the day that I had photographed him up in Swiss Cottage.
Yeah.
He was probably just doing the rounds of the London clubs, and that was the great thing, is that if you went out to the clubs in those days, there was no pretension, there was no VIP areas. It was like everyone sweated on the dance floor, got down together.
Yeah. And whether you're a celebrity or not, you were just, no one was coming and bombarding you with, you know, with selfies or, you know, piece of paper saying, "Can I get your autograph?" Because you were just a nobody. You were just like them. You were, you know,
it was
as equal.
It was unity on the dance floor, and as
Unity, that's right.
As I say, you know, my strapline has always been, it's all about the dancers.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, the DJ is an instrument for bringing this amazing magical music to the dancers in its purest form. And I feel that, you know, those original days at the Africa Centre, it was successful because we upheld the purity of the music and didn't let our ego get in the way, i.e. we weren't playing music that the people knew just to get them dancing, because that's kind of what people do now. You know, even when you see Trevor Nelson or Jazzy B or Norman J now, they'll play music which, to me, I mean, I've seen them play out, you know, in the last few years. And I'm disappointed. I want to be inspired. I want to hear good music. I want to hear the old classics. But not because I'm sentimental, because that music, as I said, it creates magic. It's organic, and it's true to the purity of what Rare Groove is all about. And that's the rarity. It's the rarity in Rare Groove. People get it confused. They think it's Rare Records. But it's actually, the rarity is actually this music that we were finding in those days. It was rare because it wasn't commercial. So you had to dig deep for it. You had to play albums that weren't commercial. You had to go into small record shops and basements and play through records that had been discarded for years and years and years.
Literally make a new track out of an old track.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what hip hop, you know, shortly after the Rare Groove scene, then there was, you know, people sampling. But in those days, those days, you know, those early days of hip hop, which it wasn't called hip hop, it was, you know, like rap. And it was disco rap in the early days. But, you know, those early days of hip hop that followed the Rare Groove scene, they were influenced by what we were playing in the clubs, and they realized that this whole body of music was far funkier than the crap that was being produced for the commercial clubs in the soul clubs. And people like, you know, SOS Band and Fatback Band and the Gap Band, who had been funk and soul acts.
Blackbirds.
They all started producing this absolute, what I call, you know, rubbish commercial music. And the disco beat came in, the big bass lines came in, the synth bass lines came in, and suddenly you had these big beefy tracks that you couldn't, if you put those side by side, you couldn't play a Rare Groove track. So if you went to somewhere like Hammersmith Palais and heard someone like Steve Walsh play, he couldn't get away with the music that we were playing in the smaller clubs, because he had to follow each of those beefed up, you know, 1980s soul club records. He had to follow it with another
banger
that had the same vibe, and that was the stuff that was being pushed out of the record by the record labels.
And they didn't have that in their books at all, in their record books.
And we left all that crap out.
Yeah,
I mean, I call it crap, but, you know, things, you know, things, well, all the SOS band stuff is really typical.
Yeah.
You know, Just Be Good to Me.
Yeah,
And yeah, they are 80s, they've come now known as, you know, 80s sort of club anthems.
Well,
but that was the stuff we were rebelling against.
yeah, I mean, you know, pretty much SOS was actually a kind of Rick James spin-off, if you think about it, because Rick James was making that type of music. He was making kind of like pop rock, funk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know,
it was a mixture of electronic and big beats. You got the Mary Jane Girls, which is one classic tune, All Night Long, which he actually, you know, he wrote and actually and produced in his days. But yes, pretty much, you know, with these DJs like, you know, Trevor Nelson and you know, Norman J, after they got a bit of commercial attributes from, you know, from the people, not speaking illy of them, they had to actually, you know, play what people are familiar with, pretty much, and not play for the diehards. The times when they used to play for the diehards soon died away, because when they got a little bit of fame, then what happened is that they had to keep their people. It's almost like like, you know, creating a website, and then after having people who will come to the website, the footfalls. So pretty much these guys had to actually, you know, play to the wrong people, so to speak. However, it's a good thing that they did that, because it left space for people like yourself, people for like, you know, Jazzy B and other artists. You know, the list goes on. I can't pick them out of my mouth at the moment. Yeah, because of them, other DJs found a space for them to actually, where they can sit, and there's new ground to discover, and pretty much it was pretty much new ground. I mean, because, you know, we can say, you know, as British people, as myself, we are in the forefront of, you know, the change of the music. Drum and bass went to the States, and just, you know, it annihilated the whole set. Every track that you heard, every film that you heard, they had any fast-paced section that they have in a film. In any action films, they would have a drum and bass. They would have a drum and bass beat behind it. Any other tune, any other fast-paced movies, they would have drum and bass. So that actually, you know, conquered the world, and it came out of Britain, and it came out of a scene that was brought to Britain from the States, and not even from the States. It was more from Jamaica, Spanish, another community building the hip hop scene, and then after creating it through the reggae artists there, and the music and the speakers and the equipment that they had to use to actually portray the music, to play the music, and then after it comes over here. And then after it goes through another rebirth. It goes through another phoenix effect, where it's actually it's being used as its natural form, but as used in a real organic way. And then after taken out of its organic way, and then represented, and then after, you know, recreated through electronic music, which we have EDM now. And our EDM is actually thanks to, you know, a lot of British artists, a lot of American artists, more the British artists. EDM is actually part of the music scene. That's actually even dubstep. Dubstep is something that is actually a British.
It's like an evolution.
It's an evolution already, because back in the day, because we used to do a lot of festivals. You see, in Britain we do a lot of festivals, And if we're not doing a rock festival, which back in those days, it wasn't much rock festivals. It was a rock festival mixed with reggae, mixed with a bit of Afrobeat, world music. It was never just a rock events, as it is now. When you go to a rock gig, it's just out and out rock music and hard rock and, you know, thrash metal. Back then, you know, when you used to go to festivals, and if it was a music festival, a rock festival, you would have reggae artists that they were doing, you know, supporting one of the bands. You know, they have world beat artists supporting one of the main bands, one of the rock bands. So it was very much a big difference. So very much the dubstep is actually slow down reggae. You know what I'm saying? It's like urban reggae, but made electronically and made with acid effect. You know, it had a very much the acid and, you know, kind of psychedelia that is, you know, attributed to that sort of scene. And especially you got the festival scene. So again, thanks to like the reggae artists, because back then we if we wanted to go to a festival, this is what the government used to say. The government used to say, listen, you reggae artists and you reggae sound systems, we will give you the park, right? Go in the park, far over there in the corner, and you can build whatever you want, as big as you want, and play it as loud as you want. And they didn't realize actually they were giving, you know, these people the footsteps to what we have now as paid festivals. The paid festivals that we have now is part of our scene that actually came from, you know, from again rare groove, hip hop, and music in general. So those guys, they used to go on the Coxsone, you know what I'm saying, and, you know, Saxon, all those in Forsyth, you know what I'm saying, you know, they used to play in the parks, and they didn't realize, the government didn't realize that so many people would turn up. And there was a lot of people that turned up, not only just black people, it was predominantly black, because it was a community, and very much it was, you know, you will have people who are non-black who would come to these events. Well, so it pretty much, you know, the rare groove scene has a long history, especially in Britain, when it comes to certain people who were the ambassadors pushing it forward and trying to actually, you know, create a scene for happiness, no violence, not hurting and saying horrible things, misogynistic things to people, or those sort of bullshit. You know what I'm saying? It was everybody was happy. Everybody was happy. And this is before ease. this is before ecstasy, you know. Everybody used to drink a tea or drink a Guinness, you know what I'm saying, and feel nice, smoke a spliff, and, you know what I'm saying, everybody nice, you know what I'm saying. You will see Margaret Thatcher probably smoking a spliff, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
I wouldn't go that far.
I wouldn't go that far, yeah, but, you know, you definitely her daughter. Her daughter was a great smoker, and I can say that categorically. So the music scene in Britain is actually, you know, what you guys did, you know, and what we are part of. People don't realize that, you know, we are part of the strands of the change of British music, the diversity we have in British music now. You've got all these artists that are singing, you know, everybody wants to become an artist and they want to be the next best singer, or etc. But you have different styles, you know, different styles of artists. We have Kate Bush, who influenced a lot of black artists, you know, and some black artists wouldn't refuse to actually say so because the person who influenced them was non-black. Do you understand? So there's cultural, you know what I'm saying, favorism that goes on. However, in the history of like the rare groove, it was never an issue.
No, and that's one of the wonderful things about, my memories of, going to warehouse parties, not just my own events, but other people's parties, is you would turn up in some crazy part of London that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
And someone had taken over a warehouse or an
Yeah.
interesting derelict building.
Yeah.
There was a sound system. And the vibe was, again, I have to use the word magical because those times were magical. Now, because our paths obviously crossed, Africa Centre, that's part of our
Yeah.
personal history.
And
Please, could you describe a night that you went there from beginning to end, from when you first heard about it to going there, the people, the smells, the music, anything that influenced you, some of the people that you were with.
well, the first the yeah the first night I went there, actually, the first night it was a Wicked Pulse night, actually.
Well, it was Wicked Pulse and Soul to
And
Soul.
Soul to Soul. But I only remembered Wicked Pulse because from meeting you and knowing what you used to do before, I knew that you were kind of the head guy. You were the head guy who actually brought the idea to the forefront, and everybody else was, following. They were. This is how my perception, and at that time that perception worked for me because, Soul to Soul, their name only came later on, and I found out that they played at my mum's club years and years ago, and they were called something else. However, that was at Belsize Park and near the screen on the hill. So I mean, for me, I know what you were doing, so therefore, any events that you went to, they were always funky, and they were always good places and neutral places where there was no trouble. There wasn't assholes. There wasn't, people, swinging their dicks around, or, somebody, selling drugs and selling the bad drugs or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It was never that kind of environment. It was just a place where you can release. You want to go and shake a leg, you know what I'm saying? You shake a leg, you know what I'm saying? Have a wiggle, you know what I'm saying? And, and meet some interesting people, because guys, chase the girls, and so the girls have to be, affluent to be able to actually, get the, and they want to learn the moves. Everybody wants to learn how to do a move, who's dressing. You had a big style council in Britain when it came to like the rare groove scene, because everybody had their own style. They mixed hip hop. They had a roller skating vibe with hip hop. You had it was amazing. I mean, the warehouse parties back in the day, and people don't realize and how developed London is now. Back then, London used to be derelict. You can walk into a building, literally, that's been there for maybe 10 years and nobody's been inside it, and just squat it or just live there. Some people actually made a living from doing that, Most of the best warehouse parties were in these sort of buildings that were mainly in the south of the river. Most of the warehouses parties were either in the city or the south of the river, which was just on the bordering on the Thames. You have Waterloo, Elephant Castle. All of those areas were like filled with warehouse. Old Street, King's Cross. They were prime central places that were just crying out for creative people to actually create a community of people who were just looking for somewhere to go, because London was getting a little bit old. It was getting a little bit geriatric. itch with the music scene. So the new music scene gave life to people, gave them a new outlook, gave them new influences, gave them new ways of thinking of things, thinking about out the box, because pretty much in Britain, everybody was like horse with blinkers, you know, they just ran straight, and they never sort of never got inspired by anything else that is not mainstream. So yeah, London was a great thing. I can sit here and say that I am one of the, and I'm proud to say that I'm one of the ambassadors of a British movement, and I'm sitting here with a fellow person who is actually can take that accolade as well.
Well, no, I thank you. It's very nice of you to pinpoint that moment in your moment in history. I can't obviously take credit for the Africa Centre because for me it was that fusion of two disparate groups of people coming together. There was, like, as I said, Jazzy's crowd was like the soft soul, sophisticated black crowd that would go out and listen to sophisticated reggae and revival and a sprinkling of soul.
Yeah.
So for me, it was that fusion of the sound system, what they brought and what we brought. And as I said, it was that fusion of two different scenes coming together and partying together on an amazing reggae sound system, which I can't take any credit for that. That was Jazzy's brother, Pops, who brought that sound system, with in a truck basically every single week, with his team of guys who set it up. And it was a beautifully balanced reggae sound system. And it wasn't set up for reggae. It was set up to push those subs so that whatever type of music you played, you touched upon, that electro 808 sound. And one of the big tracks that I used to drop at the Africa Centre, I think the first DJ in London to get hold of Funky Rasta on import. I found it in the basement of the Record and Tape Exchange for 40 pence. I remember the moment I found it. I didn't know what it sounded like. The label just looked so interesting. I had to buy it. It was called Funky Rastafari. And I just bought it on spec, and then I played it literally, probably the next day at the Africa Centre, and the rest is history, because that track
influenced.
That track became that track was my kind of signature tune.
It was an
and that had that 808 sound in it and that massive bass line. And every single time I played it, I always played out of it Funk Box Party. Again, another track that had that 808 production sound, like that raw 808. And you touched upon that as being, your influence as a UK, beatbox artist. And those tracks, as I said, they just fitted perfectly into, the Africa Centre vibe. And I think later on, about 6 months after I'd been rinsing it at the Africa Centre, I think Tim Westwood managed to track down because Tim used to come to the Africa Centre, so he must have heard it there. And he managed to track down the licensing, and it got released, I think, about a year after I started playing it.
Right.
But that used to wind Jazzy up, because he would be craning his neck to find out there was this white guy playing what should have been his anthem.
His anthem, exactly.
And he'd be craning his neck. What's this tune? What's this tune? And of course, it's like, who say Rasta can't play funky music? And it was that mixture of the funky music that we were bringing. And his funky Rasta. There was this great irony that there was like a white guy playing this record every single week. But no, it was interesting to hear that you also love that, like what I call that early funk box, that very raw funk box party sound. But you evaded the question which I asked you, because I always ask people the nights that they were out at the classic Rare Groove clubs, like Norman Jay's nights or our night or the Cat in the Hat.
It is really hard to say, because they all they all amalgamated into one collage of one big.
A collage.
So yeah, a collage of everything. So when I think of the African Centre, I think of also Shepherd's Bush. Is it not Shepherd's Bush? It's I think of the big warehouse that the Shaken Finger Pop, they did a big party there, which was an excellent part. That was a great party. I think you guys were down there as well. I think you were playing down there as well.
I might have been there, but I don't think
you were playing that night. I think you were.
I can't remember. I mean,
you know which warehouse I'm talking about? It's on the flyover. It's just it's now the council building. It's now a big council building, but before it was derelict, and it was like a car park, like an indoor car park, and it was an Art Deco building. So it was a 1920s building. It's been there ever since, and it's by the motorway.
Yeah, I'm not sure I was involved in that because, so my sort of little, I suppose it's a sort of claim to fame is that while Norman was playing, this amazing music on Pirate Kiss FM, I somehow managed to get his telephone number and I phoned him up because me and my Wicked Pulse, he was meant to be the business partner at the time, Andy Shaft, had found this huge warehouse in the middle of Camberwell where we were squatting a flat. And he came back one day and told me of this huge warehouse, and we went to see it. And we ended up, I've told this story before, but just to put it in context, we talked to the squatters who were in in this old cinema in Camberwell called Dicky Dirt's, and they said you can have it on a Saturday night if you give us 200 quid. So we gave them 200 quid, and it was too big for me and Andy to do because we needed 1,000 people. So when I was talking to Norman about doing an event, I said, look, we found this venue over in Camberwell. Would you like to join us? And so Norman came down to look at the venue and agreed to do this party with us. And even Norman said, this is too big just for me and you to do. And I said, well, I know this guy called Jules, Judge Jules, who is doing parties up in North London. And so I got in touch with Jules. And so the history goes, we did this party together. It was kind of instigated by me and Andy. And it was called the TARDIS because when you went through a little tiny door at the side of the building, you suddenly opened up into this massive huge area. So you didn't realise you were going into a warehouse because it was just a very unassuming door at the side of Dicky Dirt's along a little sort of brick alley. And from that night, then Jules and Norman then teamed up to do the Riverside parties.
Right.
And that's kind of where Shaken Finger Pop started at the Camberwell party. Because I said to Norman, look, I need to put Shaken Finger Pop, on the flyer. And he said, well, we don't have a logo. So I actually designed the Shaken Finger Pop logo and put it on that first flyer. And then that got used subsequently for their following parties. And I might have gone to it, but I don't think I was DJing because I think that was the last time that I collaborated with Norman.
So that would be why I thought that you were there, because the artwork on the Shaken Finger Pop flyers was actually exactly the same to your artwork. I can tell, you know what I'm saying? It's very similar. So I attribute that you had something involved with it.
Well, as I said, I designed the TARDIS. Designed the TARDIS flyer, and then I think it was Jules's girlfriend at the time used to do his flyers, and I used to go and help his girlfriend. Her name's Siobhan. With designing their flyers, and I showed her how I manipulated text on a photocopy machine. You know, the Wicked Pulse logo had a little wiggle in it. Well, that wiggle was created by moving the piece of paper as the photocopier went across.
Yeah.
So as it came out
Yeah.
of the photocopier, you'd get that little movement and the wiggle.
Yeah.
And I showed Savon how to do it. And yeah, if you look on the Riverside flyers, you'll see that she uses the same motion of the photocopier.
Yeah.
And that was like a little technique that I
It's a
showed her.
technique, It's a skill.
And also on my flyers, I always had dancers because like I said before, it was always about the dancers.
Exactly.
And so I always put little dancers on the flyer. And again, I showed Savon, you know, how I montaged all the, you know, the graphics together with the flyers. Yeah. So I think that my graphic style heavily influenced Jules's girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
And
pretty much the scene in London, pretty much, because, you know, if we see anything that is reminiscent to your style of work, then we know it's going to be a good party. You know, we know it's going to have a good turnout. There's going to be some good people there, and there definitely is going to be dancers. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I did see. I've seen my own graphics appear on many of those old school flyers. In retrospect, because you didn't get to see every single flyer, but you know, over the years, I've actually seen people who have taken, you know, my own drawings of dancers and put them on their own flyers.
Yeah.
But you know, I at the time, you know, I used on the original Wicked Pulse. I mean, I used the Tommy Boy, you know, those little Tommy Boy flyers. So you know, I was pulling in those days. Yeah. We weren't interested in, or we didn't really understand copyright in the same way the early samplers didn't understand copyright. Yeah. We just wanted to get the dancers down. So anything with a graphic of a dancer, I would slap on the flyers, including my own little drawings of dancers. And people would obviously use those images, and I'm just as guilty as the next man of taking, you know, images of dancers. In fact, over the years, I've built up probably the world's largest archive of like little dancing graphics from all over the world, which, you know, I call the Dance Museum. And I'm just fascinated by, you know, beautiful images that encapsulate what I call the dynamic of dance or the expression of dance. And at some point, I want to build this museum called the Dance Museum, which hosts, you know, all these amazing images and graphics. In fact,
it would definitely have to have Covent Garden as a basis, because, you know, most of the dancers used to come through Covent Gardens.
Well, the whole idea of the Dance Museum is it becomes like the global hub for dance culture and dance music. Yeah. And it represents every discipline of like subculture, from hip hop, drum and bass, jungle, and it charts, you know, the history of where all these genres came from.
Oh no!
No. I'm gonna thank you. Just do you wanna?
I was gonna plug my. Sorry.
No, just on a little technical level, battery's running low, and we're just plugging straight into Yanki's. Thanks, Yanki.
No, sorry, I didn't realize. But no, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. You need an Apple.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's just let this go, and I've got a packet. Because you're on a roll. But what I want you to do, just see whether because I know I keep pressing you, but I just want you to bring alive, one of these parties.
Oh my God! You see, you know, it's very. That's why Steve is so hard, because, you know, as you probably don't remember, but I mentioned that I had a car accident in 2009. So in 2009, I started working for a spinal clinic, and I was actually one of the physio assistants who used to build strength building programs. And I was on my way to Cornwall, and therefore, you know, I had a car accident. So for a good part of a year, I had to get neurological therapy in order to get my speech right, because I was forgetting a lot of words and not being able to actually have a focus in my conversation. So I had to be retrained. So some of the memories, like I say, is actually a one big collage, because that's the only way that I can actually save energy and my brain will remember, you know. I mean, come on, we have, you know, like again, Rockbox, we have the parties that were down by the taxi firm, which was in Lambeth South, going Lambeth South, just on the edge of Westminster, which influenced Ministry of Sound, which, because before Ministry of Sound, they were this taxi firm which everybody used to hire and put on parties there, and that was that's where the Novotel hotel is in there. You had that, which was a taxi firm. You had Sunrise. Sunrise was, again, which was down in Wandsworth. These were, you know, warehouse parties, and again, that was actually, you know, in a different era, because what people didn't realize is that, you know, and do you realize that in Britain, the government actually banned hip hop from being played in any club in England? This is real.
Is this an untold? I've never heard this story. Is this an untold story, or is it known?
It's known, but people have forgotten. They have forgotten. Margaret Thatcher made it quite clear that she didn't want any clubs, you know, and the ministry of, I think it was something, you know, said that, you know, hip hop music was a bad influence. Although the GLC, Ken Livingstone, who, you know, bless his soul, he stopped a lot of people from going to prison because he created the GLC. He created the Greater London Council, which was housing most of these hip hop events, which was doing like shows and stuff. So a lot of small network, you know, local groups used to get together and actually, you know, do their shows at these events. So, you know, take a hat off to Ken Livingstone, guys. You got to say big respect to Ken Livingstone as well, because some of our fathers would have been still in prison right now if it wasn't for that man. So, so yeah, and I say that tongue in cheek. Yeah. You had that, and again, like I was saying, it's actually you had the music scene where the house was coming in, and then the hip hop was dying. You had hip house, which was amalgamating the two two vibes. You had a few good tunes that came out of that era, and then after, you know, that died. So pretty much, you know, that the club, the warehouse sort of parties and sort of community started from the soul funk reggae scene, and then later on it changed into, you know, drum and bass, house, grime artists doing performances and stuff like that. I mean, God, Rockbox. What else? Empire was kind of like, Empire is still standing there. It's now a casino. Maximus was quite heavy. Wag Club was quite heavy as well. Wag Club, used to do a lot of the hip hop events and a lot of rare groove events, a lot of funk and soul nights. But those were in clubs. That it was a different vibe. You know, the ones that were in warehouses were, you know, new textiles, new. You know, you had, you know, scratch videos being played, projected on the wall. You had some artist, some guy he just took a reel, a 15 inch, 15 millimeter reel, and actually just got a bit of a film that he actually, you know, found somewhere and just spliced it together, and then actually got this mixture of different images that is popping up on, just to give, you know, ambiance to get ambiance to the place, you know, and pretty much that was the template for most of the clubs in London at the minute. So, you know, we all have our finger in this, and if we had a law that actually, you know, you can get copyright from ideas, you know what I'm saying, from just ideas alone, which is kind of impossible to actually manage. We will be billionaires now.
Well, you just touched upon, you know, these creative environments in the warehouses that were more exciting than just going into, you know, a rich club owner's club that was just really making money on the drinks, and it was all set up around the drinks. Whereas the warehouses were a creative experience based around the, you know, the music culture of that era.
Yeah.
And you know, you've got to give credit to Philip Salon, who I think he was one of the most innovative club promoters, because for the first time, what he would do is he would take over a club like the Mud Club at Busby's, and he would transform it to make his own environments. You know, before, all the raves were doing, like, you know, all their like acid house banners and all the banners.
Yeah, sure.
And that's why I introduced banners when we did, you know, the Africa Centre, because I was heavily influenced by the environments that, you know, Philip set up when he did places like, well, it started off obviously, I mean, Comedy Store. He actually started off in Piccadilly. It moved to Comedy Store, and then when he moved to Busby's, that was where, you know.
It's actually the other way around. Actually, it was Busby's first.
No. I'm sorry, because I was taking photographs at the Comedy Store.
Okay.
And then because Comedy Store was smaller.
Yeah.
And they had to move to Busby's because it became so popular. And then he reigned at Busby's for probably 2-3 years.
Yeah, even not more.
And then after he got closed down there, eventually he did the Opera House. That came a little bit later. Yeah. But yeah, Philip Salon must take credit for the first person who, you know, brought banners in. There were like probably projections of, you know, spools of Super 8 going round and round, or even 16mm projectors going round and round.
And lots of up and coming DJs that were actually coming and playing, you know, a collection of songs that they knew. Quite a few of them didn't actually play a lot of rare grooves, but they would play certain tunes that they knew that what people would dance to. Say, for instance, Set It Off by Strife, yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was I heard that in New York. I think, you know, the month or the week it was released, I just happened to be in New York, and I heard it in a New York club. A DJ was playing it. I can't remember the name of the club. Yeah. And I immediately went up to him. I said, "What on earth is this record?" And I hunted that record down, and that was just such, for me, that was a massive influential record. Because it was an electro record, but it had textures. It had depth. It had syncopation.
Live bass.
It just created. It was like, it just had a particular character of its own. I don't think anyone's produced another record.
And you cannot categorize it. That's the thing as well, because it falls in the market of rare groove. It falls in the market of house. It falls in the market of, you know, experimental music, and it's actually, you know, holds those strings, you know. Very good track. I mean, you have DJs, you got tracks like that. Say, for instance, Rights in Lagos. Again, another big track, which is that was very good for the because remember, before body popping, it was robots. It you know, it was syncopation, movements, you know, that sort of things, and then that amalgamated into, you know, into the body popping style.
Well, James Brown was, you know, famous for showing you how to do the robot. I mean, that was very early on.
That was
before everybody was doing body popping, and there was James Brown. You know, doing the robot dance. I mean, there's archive footage of him, which, you know, I think I wasn't even aware that he'd done it. It's only like with YouTube that you realise like how advanced or how ahead of his time James Brown was.
Yes, he was. Actually, he's another ambassador of, you know, a trailblazer. Sorry, excuse me. Another trailblazer that we look at the bad side, you know, when he got locked up in prison and whatever, or when he beat up his wife or whatever. But we don't actually, you know, praise him for, you know, what he brought to the music scene prior to the band that was already there with the artist that was before. He just came in as a nobody and took over and created a monster. He absolutely created a monster, you know what I'm saying? So that's another artist. So we all part of this forever evolving, you know, perpetually evolving, not a revolution, but it's an evolution, which is forever growing. But however, what is happening is actually nobody's getting the right and the accolades. It's not important, but it's always nice to say to somebody, oh, you know, you influenced me in X, Y, and Z. You just is, and we are kind of, we've lost that. So hence that we need to do these sort of documentations so that we can actually so people of the younger years who are the millenniums who think that they created everything. I mean, we were once there ourselves. We believe that we created everything. So we can relate to the new generation that we had a mindset until we grew up and we realized that, you know, the world is always any idea that you have is been thought about many years before and wouldn't change, but the process of what happens from the idea may come in a different format. So, you know, we have to be blessed and pat ourselves on the back to say thank you to be alive in this day and age with so many genres of music.
Well, I see our role as, I mean, especially as, you know, a DJ or a promoter, we're kind of custodians, and we're custodians of the music for a short period of time.
Yeah.
And, you know, we don't make, as DJs, we don't make the music. No. You know, it's not about us as DJs or our DJ name. And that, you know, that's one of the reasons I suppose I've always been behind the scene, because I've never really enjoyed the limelight. For me, it's always been that creative process of bringing people together, searching for music that creates this so-called, you know, magic on the dance floor, music that is counterculture, i.e. counter to the pop culture or the commercial, more importantly, counter to the commercial stuff that gets rammed down our throats by the majors who are just on this sort of money-making train. It's about digging for those tracks, just special moments in time. And as a DJ, just bringing that story and bringing that music to light. You know, we can't take credit for the music, but we can curate it and we can bring it together in what I call its purity. So, you know, what I want to do with you, Yanki, is because, you know, we haven't even touched upon really your personal story. We've gone off on many tangents during this discussion, and we must follow up with part 2. And I know there's a part 3 as well, which we must cover as well. So if we just call this, you know, introduction part 1 as a little teaser of some of the ground that we will be covering. You know, I thank you for being part of the Untold Story of Rare Groove.
Thank you very much.
Giving up your time to tell part of your story. I just wanted to say, you mentioned that track Strafe.
Strafe.
Set It Off, or Strafe, I don't know how to pronounce it. But strictly, I wouldn't call it Rare Groove. It was just such a progressive record at the time. And it's gone on to probably influence a lot of like electro and also just producers at the time. It to me, that wasn't a Rare Groove track. It was played during that era as an exceptional record that just experimental. And again, a pivotal record, an influential record.
So wouldn't you say that because it's experimental, it is just like the Can, who were making, kind of rock music, that it is a groove that is rare in its elements, in the formats, in the time scale that it was being made, because house music wasn't really big then.
Well, it was kind of it was sort of proto house, wasn't it?
It was way before it was way proto house, because it had all the elements that house shouldn't have.
I'm just saying that in its strictest form, it's a groove and it's rare, and it was rare at the time in terms of you couldn't find that record because it hadn't been commercially released. It was an influential record. But my definition of Rare Groove is always, it's got to be organic, and it's got to have syncopation, and then it's, the added elements of jazz, soul, funk, those are just added elements that go on the organic and the syncopated. But, that record was a very early electronic record, produced in a studio, and it was purely electronic. So, I'm not classing it as strictly Rare Groove. Just for the, just...
No, of course. I mean, we're using a title in terms of specifying a track which had a great influence on myself, and great influence on yourself. So it's, and then on top of it, it's using 808, but also it's got a guitar which needs to be synced. And then there's live bass as well, and then there's, with the electronic drums, there's live drums as well playing in the background. So the whole idea of it being electronic is skewed by the live artists that who actually will paint in.
It's a record with an amazing vibe, and that's what we're as DJs. Digging in the underground, we're always looking for those quirky one-off sounding records that are,
nobody else has.
Well, it's not even nobody else has, but maybe someone else doesn't have the balls to play a record that they know is underground or under the radar.
I mean, they use this. You've heard of a DJ called DJ Fingers?
Yeah, do you know, the weird thing is he actually phoned me yesterday.
Right, how bizarre is that? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, DJ Fingers was actually, in terms of me creating, because getting influences, as a beatboxer in London, getting influences, it was very hard to actually get influences. I would listen to music and then after get inspired by a certain sound and then try and create it and then try and use it as part of my my toolkit in my sounds. And he used to mix a Ian Jury track, which was actually bastard arsehole fucking cunt, which was, he used it bastard arsehole fucking cunt, and he used to have a James Planet Rock playing in the background, so he would cut it up, and very much he used to give me some influence, and I used to say to him, and I'm saying, you know what, sometimes when I didn't have like a idea or anything, and I hear you cutting up, and I'm saying, you used to influence me, and I used to like to. So there was a lot of DJs out there that helped helped me, as a beatboxer in London. I wasn't only just a beatboxer. I was also, saying a producer, and as a person who had a good understanding of sound. Yeah, lots of people gave me a lot of influence. So it was a magical thing. It was a magical time. These times are trying to be recreated by these events that you put on together at the Fox and Firkin, which is on the 29th.
29th of January, Fox and Firkin. It's called the Expansions Rare Groove Party.
Great name.
5 events rolled into one. We'll have a singing competition that's looking for the next Aretha Franklin and Marvin Gaye. We've got networking. We've got pop-up market. We've got 30 stalls. The 30 stalls were sold within 3 days of us announcing it. So we've got a little pop-up market in the garden. We've got a well-known UK sound system in the garden for the early garden party. It starts at 4 p.m.
Nice.
Saxon Sound, 5th Avenue.
Nice.
And I'm working with Mystery from My Soul. Mystery comes from a slightly different strand of the rare groove scene. He was in like what I call the blues dance rare groove scene, which was underground and kind of running parallel to what I call our funkier counterpart, which was the James Brown. His was more the kind of the 2-step sophisticated soul scene.
Yeah.
So we're bringing two parts of the rare groove scene together. 29th of Jan, Fox and Firkin, Lewisham.
And I'll be there myself, actually, shaking a leg, twisting a leg, having a wiggle and having a giggle.
Well, Yanki, thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
And it's great to catch up with you.
Thank you very much.
As I said, we only just scratched the surface, so
Yes.
We'll do another interview. I want to dig deeper into your history.
Yeah.
I know you've got a very, very colourful history in music, production. Actually, I think you can hold up. We've had this contract sitting on the table, which we were going to discuss because this is part of a unique story, which.
This is my contract with Scratch Me Music, Daryl Madison, who actually came over to London. He headhunted me to actually to make me an international artist. Actually, and he paid my folks some part of 250,000 to have me as an
thousand UK pounds.
Yeah,
that's £250,000, and this is 1985. I mean, just zoom into the camera.
Yeah.
This is a contract, a music contract from 1985.
Yeah, it was a proposal, and be it that my parents my mother was my agent. She dealt with all the ins and outs. This is just let me just go through. This is a proposal in 1984, 1985.
Well, this contract is so fascinating. Let me tell you guys who are watching the RAREGROOVE.com Untold Story of Raregroove. We're actually going to go through the contract page by page and actually read it because it was, Yanki, although he signed it, he got the money. I think the guy disappeared under some weird circumstances, so he paid you all this money and then suddenly disappeared. So Yanki was going to become a world. He was going to be launched on the world stage. It never happened. This is 1985, same year that we did the Africa Centre, same year that probably Yanki and I met. There was such a bubbling scene in London, and this document mentions lots of people who were around at the time, and we'll go through it in part 2.
Nice one.